Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that when not to lead, when it makes sense to follow. There are times to be a first mover and there's times to do something brand new. But more often than not, I think the answer is actually not to do that, to follow. It's an act of humility, and we have to put aside our individual and organizational egos to say, no, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel.
Welcome to Insights Exchange, the crossroads of ideas and academia. I'm your host, Nikesh Gosalia. In each episode, I sit down with leading experts and visionaries who are driving innovation in the world of research and publishing, prepared to be inspired, provoked, and informed as we journey through the latest advancements and ideas. Join us as we bring together thought leaders and fresh perspectives, and welcome to the conversation once again. Today, we are honored to have Lauren Kane, the CEO of Bio1, join us. With nearly 2 decades of experience in scholarly publishing, Lauren has been a dynamic leader, driving sustainable strategies and fostering innovation for academic societies, publishers, and research organizations. She's a very well-respected voice in the community, known for her advocacy for nonprofit collaborations and collective impact models. As the 2020-2021 president of the Society for Scholarly Publishing, SSP, Lauren played a pivotal role in shaping the future of the industry. She is here to share her thoughts on the current trends and future directions of scholarly publishing. Welcome, Lauren, and thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Nikesh. That's such a kind introduction. And I'm such a fan of yours and such a fan of the podcast. I'm delighted to be here and do this today.
Thank you. Thank you once again for making time. So let's just get started with a little bit about Bio1. So as the CEO of Bio1, which is, of course, a leading nonprofit collaborative and content aggregator in the biological, ecological, and environmental sciences space, could you share some insights on how the landscape of nonprofit scholarly publishing has evolved over the past 2 decades? Specifically, what significant changes and developments have you observed in this field?
Wow. Well, certainly there's been, so many changes over the past 20 years. Bio1 just celebrated its 25th anniversary. And so we're doing a lot of reflecting on all the things that kind of have evolved in that time. And so, if you kind of take a step back and look at the overall market, certainly we're all well aware of all the shifts that have happened. There's been overall compression of the market, less resources available, tightening library budgets specifically. We've also seen a number of user shifts, greater research needs for greater accessibility, moving beyond the primacy of the article, all of these things. And so I think what we're seeing is this overall that we need to do more. We want to do more, but we have less resources, and all these things that we see on a market level when we're talking about nonprofits specifically, and especially small societies, they feel this even more acutely. And so on the positive side, so you see all these kind of overall pressures happening in the market, and this kind of continue to build over time. But I think the positive side of that is what that's really driven is innovation. Because when you have these drivers of less resources and more needs, what you obviously need to do to, move in a positive direction is to do maybe things differently. And also to do things in collaboration. I mean, the single biggest thing that I think we're seeing now, and that I think we're going to continue to see in the future, is this understanding that we can't kind of make the change we need to make alone, and that we're going to need to collaborate. And so for Bio1 specifically, that's something that's very much in our DNA, and we are an aggregate, we are a collaborative. And so that's something, we've done in terms of the corpus of organizations and societies and journals that we work with. But I think what we're seeing is that we then, as an organization ourselves, are also going to need to collaborate with others going into the future. And we're seeing this kind of writ large in the industry, which to me is very exciting.
Thanks for sharing that, Lauren. I think I should have probably asked this before, but nevertheless, I think, it still is a perfect segue. So from your perspective, what motivates you to be part of, nonprofit? I mean, we know how challenging it is. You've already spoken about some of them. So what motivates you? What drives you? And just before you go ahead, I mean, from my perspective, I've always seen you just so positive. There are not, few different, how do I say, shades to Lauren. I think you're always, very happy to have a conversation. You're always very, very, direct, very transparent, very principled in your approach as well, Lauren. If there is something that I would reach out to you with, even if it's a few days, you'll always get back. And, that's brilliant. And we need obviously more folks in our industry doing that. But coming back to the main, question, I mean, what motivates you to be part of Bio1 or this particular sector?
Well, again, thank you so much. That's really, really kind of you to say. And I feel the same about you as a colleague as well. I think the thing is that a little, personal as well as professional insight is that I'm an extremely competitive person. And I think that's one of the reasons I actually like working in nonprofits. So obviously I believe in the mission and there's so much to achieve. And then on a very personal side, it is more difficult to achieve the things that we want to achieve in a nonprofit environment when typically, unless you're working for a very large nonprofit organization, resources are much more slim. And so there's that added kind of heightened intensity of I want to achieve all these things and I want to do this, with a slim budget, with less people, with less resources. And so it makes it all the more gratifying when you are able to achieve these things. And also this is, as you keep pointing out, I have worked in this industry for 2 decades. So thank you for continuing to underscore, my age. But, I think that it also is a community that I really enjoy. I think the people are just unbelievable. It's such a privilege to work in this community and with these, other kind of just, fantastic leaders and innovators and, many of whom you've had on the show. And so I think for that, too, it really is a privilege to work with these people, to collaborate with these people and try to make things better, not just for the organizations that we directly work for, but also thinking again about this kind of community overall. How can we make things better for everyone? How can we raise all boats, is something that I take very seriously.
Thank you for sharing that, Lauren. And I echo the sentiment. I remember when I moved to the UK about 11 years back, and when I went for the first conference, which was, I think, the APE conference in Berlin, I was so stressed. I wasn't sure, how people are going to perceive. I don't know everything about the publishing processes. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, Lauren. I looked quite young as well. So, so I wasn't sure if people will take me seriously. But people throughout the last 10, 11 years have, been so helpful. They've always supported. I've felt comfortable more and more as times pass by to ask any sort of questions and get clarifications. And you're absolutely right. I think it's kind of a relatively small world, but it's one where if you have very strong bonds, then you feel more and more comfortable. And it is unique in that sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, I think it's a good thing, too. I think, proving people there's nothing better or more satisfying than proving people wrong that have underestimated you, in terms of individuals. But I also feel that way in terms of organizations. For me, I think that's kind of my mindset a lot of the times with Bio1. People are like, wow, you guys are doing this or you achieved this and you have such a small team or you don't have this. And there's nothing better than that. It's so satisfying. And I don't think you'd necessarily have that mindset if you worked for a very well-resourced commercial organization.
Exactly. Absolutely. And just again, final comment on that, Lauren, I think, not, to be honest, I mean, in my experience, not everyone can do that. You wake up every morning and take that challenge and say that, I'll do this with limited resources, with limited budgets. You start to think of it, a lot of negative factors start to stack up. But you need to be intrinsically motivated, and which you are. So, fantastic work. I know you touched upon maybe 1 or 2 challenges, but in case if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, according to you, what other unique challenges and opportunities that non-profit publishers face compared to, say, for-profit counterparts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, as we said, with a very few exceptions of a few wealthy nonprofit publishers with large endowments, most of us don't have the same resources as compared to our for-profit counterparts. But I think this is a double-edged sword. I really feel like this can be an advantage. I think it makes us scrappier, more innovative, more nimble and agile and willing to take chances on things. We don't have the pressures of shareholder return. So we can make decisions based on mission and impact, even if they have slimmer margins. And that really, I think, in many cases can free us from those expectations and obligations. And so, I personally feel that some of the most innovative, creative things that are pressing the boundaries of our industry are happening in the nonprofit space and are specifically happening with smaller not-for-profit organizations, precisely because we have less to lose.
Absolutely. And so from where we are, how do you envision the future of nonprofit collaborations within the realm of, scholarly communications?
Yeah. I personally feel, again, I am an optimist, but I also see a lot of evidence. I'm pragmatic enough to say, well, what's happening now? And I think what you see happening now out there is so many examples of collaborations happening, of people innovating. And so I think, the future is very bright. I think you've also are going to start seeing a lot less talking and a lot more doing. I mean, I think this industry has talked a good game, for many years about collaborating and working together and the things we need to do in partnership. But, the market has been positive enough that we haven't really had to go there. We can speak to it, but we can kind of keep in our own silos and do our own things and, have our own brands. But one of the things I think you're seeing with market pressures kind of continuing and resources getting slimmer, people are realizing, okay, now actually is the time that I have to do these things. So I think you'll see us all acting on those things that we've had the vision for some time, and coming together, whether it's through collaboration or partnership, or even more taking a page out of the commercial playbook. And I think you're going to see a lot more, M&A activities, even in the not-for-profit segment, with just this overall understanding that we can do more together than we can do apart. And that means things like economies of scale, things on the expense side, but it also means this magnification of our impact that if, as nonprofit organizations that have this mission-based charter, that we need to be constantly asking ourselves, are we delivering on that mission? And it's something I feel and many feel in the market that, there's far too much redundancy. There's far too much, I have this version of, this thing or this infrastructure or this program, that if we instead, work together to do this, that we could not just, save a lot of precious resources, but that we could have a greater impact together.
Absolutely. And are we, in your opinion, doing enough to create more inclusive research communities? And if not, how can nonprofit organizations like Bio1 lead the way, like you've done for so many things?
Well, I mean, it's a big charge. It's an important charge. I think, all we can do is that, or what we must do is kind of, live our charter. So again, for Bio1 as an aggregate, as a collaborative, that's what we were founded to do in 1999. And so I think we need to, continually be checking in. And this is true for us. And I think it's true for others of, are we living that mission? Are we being inclusive in our approach, not just in what we do, but in the partnerships we have, in these communities we create, among our user base? Are things devolving into an echo chamber where we're only listening to ourselves or other organizations like that? Or are we truly kind of crossing the aisle and having a well-rounded, inclusive, global perspective? I think, these are challenges, but these are things that we have to kind of check ourselves on all the time. Absolutely.
You've also been an advocate for collective impact models. Just for the benefit of listeners, could you explain what collective impact means in the context of scholarly publishing and research?
Well, I mean, for me, it's kind of, exactly what it sounds like. The idea that the impact we have as a group, a small group, a large group, the idea that we can do more together than apart. So that's kind of broadly speaking what we're talking about with collective impact models. But I think for me, I'm, specifically very interested in this idea of business or economic models that support this sort of thinking. This idea that we can kind of, tie our futures together economically under certain models. Subscribe to open is one of, I think, the most prevalent examples of a collective impact model. And Bio1 will be piloting Subscribe to Open in 2026 with up to half of our corpus. So this is a big strategic deal, for us. Obviously, we're, learning from the example of many others that have kind of come before us with Subscribe to Open. And I think that, there's certainly lots of opinions about the model. And is it the only solution? Is it a one size fits all solution? Absolutely not. But I think it's a phenomenal example of real thinking around collective impact, of not just what can publishers or journals do together to achieve these access aims while ensuring sustainability, but also this idea of it really brings libraries and users into the mix as well. So when we're talking about collective impact here, we're talking about, how can societies and journals achieve open access, but continue to have their financial needs met. We're talking about libraries. How can we have respect for existing library budgets that don't have room to continue to expand and grow, but also have this, mandate towards open access? And then also, how do we bring users into this of making sure that they are getting, all the content that they deserve to further scholarship, to further research? So you are designing a business model, a distribution model around these collective aims, which is so challenging, but so, exciting to me to have something that works in all those contexts. So that's the stuff that really kind of excites me, and that I would love to see our industry kind of taking on more. Subscribe to Open being a major milestone in this arena, but also what's next? How are we going to build on the example set by Subscribe to Open to, further these aims in the future?
Absolutely. And in your opinion, what metrics or indicators are most useful for assessing the impact of some of these initiatives?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think it's a real challenge, because just looking at models in general in our industry, and you think, how do we judge success? And traditionally, these are mostly quantitative measures of how much money do we save? How much money do we earn? Or even things like usage, how are we reaching enough people? Or something with open access of, is this open access article reaching more people than a gated article would reach? But again, these are all quantitative methods. And then when we think about qualitative methods, how do we judge the success of a public good? How do we judge the success of, are we communicating science to a broader audience, a public, audience? These are things that I think we're still progressing about. How do you evaluate these things? But adding metrics in this way, I think, is really important, because to your point, how do we judge that we are succeeding in having this collective impact unless we have these methods for evaluation?
Absolutely. And just reflecting on your experience, Lauren, what has been the most rewarding experience for you in working on collective impact initiatives?
Yeah, it's, as you can see, it's something I'm pretty passionate about. So I think for me, it's just been incredibly rewarding being part of this process and learning from others, learning from those who kind of came before us or that are doing it now. I owe a huge debt to someone that I consider, a friend and colleague and real mentor in Raim Crow, who I think only some people know because he's so humble, that was really the architect of the Subscribe to Open model with annual reviews initially. And so, working with Raim, working with annual reviews, Cameron Name was also part of the team that was originally working on Subscribe to Open with annual reviews. He's now a member of the Bio1 board. That's been very gratifying. Project Muse is a close Bio1 partner. They're also working on Subscribe to Open, and they're a fellow nonprofit aggregation. There's so many other organizations and individuals that I've had the benefit of working with, both broadly in our community, but also in Subscribe to Open particular. And I think that really highlights, A, what I think is so special about this industry, but B, what's really special about models like this is that you have the ability to learn from others, to learn from these best practices and, successes and failures. And, how are we evolving this together? That gets to the very crux of what I think we need to do as an industry and as a community to move forward.
Absolutely. Because you've played a leadership role for so many years, Lauren, from your perspective, are there any experiences that come to your mind in leading such initiatives and any key takeaways for other leaders in the field?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that when not to lead, when it makes sense to follow. And I mean, I think this is a lesson that I'm still learning. And again, it's true personally and it's true organizationally. There are times to be a first mover and there's times to do something brand new, to build an infrastructure, to design a model, to, any of these things. But more often than not, I think the answer is actually not to do that, to follow. And it's something that's challenging, right? It's an act of humility, and we have to put aside our individual and organizational egos to say, no, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Someone else has already done that. There is already this infrastructure. There is already this model. There's already this journal. How instead can we work collaboratively together where I can bring my core competencies to the table? I can add value in these ways, but I do not need to own it. I do not need to drive it. And again, I think, as an industry, there's a lot that we can take from that, but also on a smaller level, I think these are the lessons that as leaders and as contributors in the industry, we need to take of thinking like, again, where do I follow?
Absolutely. Because you also have, such rich experience over the last 2 decades, developing sustainable strategies for societies, publishers, even research organizations. In your opinion, how can publishers balance sustainability with the growing demand for open access?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we need to stop doing, is this idea that sustainability and equitability have to be at cross purposes. I mean, again, I think things like subscribe to open, and not saying that's the only path, but I think that has shown us that these are not conflicting goals, that they in fact can be interlinked. And when they are interlinked, it's very powerful. BioOne's interest in the S2L model really came from the desire to pursue open access, but to do so in a more equitable way than APC-based, approaches would really allow in our particular disciplines. Again, APC-based approaches work well in some disciplines and work well with certain organizations. For us, what we saw is that would really it would solve for a user-based equity problem, but it wouldn't solve for an author-based equity problem. And so I think, what we need to do, again, more broadly, is make sure that when we are pursuing sustainability, which obviously is incredibly important, because if we don't have that sustainability for us as an organization or for the organizations we represent, then, we're not going to be able to achieve anything. But that can't come at the neglect of, we are here to, provide an increase in access. We are here to be as equitable as possible to ensure bibliodiversity and diversity in the communities that we serve. So making sure that the solutions that we pursue and the strategies we pursue keep that in mind, I think is imperative.
Absolutely. Couple of questions on innovation, Lauren, and I know that these days no conversation ends without talking about AI. And just a few weeks back, we obviously spoke at length. But just, again, for the benefit of listeners, from your perspective, is there a significant impact that AI can have in scholarly publishing? Or do you think, a lot of it is hype? Yeah, so just your overall thoughts to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a technologist. So when I think about AI, I'm really applying it to the same kind of strategies and thoughts that we've had throughout this conversation. And so, one of the things that I, on a positive level, like to look at AI about or hope that AI will produce is really that it has the potential to be an equalizer. And, some of the things for BioOne and for the societies that we represent, I'm interested in AI is that there's been a lot of things that, tools, accessibility, again, this communication of science, things like lay summaries, all the tagging that can happen in an automated way to, other languages, et cetera, that has been cost prohibitive to us and to the organizations that we represent for many years because it was happening manually, needed a lot of human intervention. So the idea that AI can make these certain technologies much cheaper, much easier to apply is exciting to me. I would love to get to the point where we could have the tools and features for our content and for our user base that the same as Elsevier can afford to provide to their communities. In that way, there's, an equalizing force at work that I think is really exciting in terms of the overall democratization of science. We talk a lot about access, as we should, but the next frontier of access isn't just providing the content. It's providing the content in a way that it can be used more readily by people, around the world. And so it comes to, issues of accessibility more broadly. And so, again, I think that's an exciting thing that AI, I hope, could potentially really help us with.
Absolutely. And it's great that you're able to talk about this or see this with a very open mind, Lauren, because I think that's one of the things that we need within our industry, which is to be having conversations about it, maybe experimenting a little bit more, being open-minded about it. Because I think just about 2 weeks back, I was having a conversation with someone and, they were saying that initially everything a few months back was about AI and Gen AI. And there was a lot of, maybe a little bit of panic, but also saying, let's try, let's experiment. But now probably they've gone to the other extreme where everything's being seen with, some amount of skepticism. And that's kind of slowed down experimentation to the other extreme.
Yeah.
And so from that point of view, again, when you think about leadership and certain qualities within our industry, what essential qualities do you think are needed to drive innovation, to embrace, technology, run new experiments, and eventually succeed in scholarly publishing?
Yeah, and I think you bring up, I think AI is a great example of how we respond to things as an industry, because you're absolutely right. At first, there's a, doom and gloom and, this is going to take everyone's jobs and be the ruin of everything we're doing. And, we faced this a decade ago. This was the same response to open access when it first, kind of came, there's going to be no profits anymore, which means no sustainability and all of this. And then when we come to kind of have cooler heads that everything has opportunities and challenges associated with it, everything. And now we've certainly benefited from, here are the opportunities of open access and the new pathways, financial and otherwise, that it has created. So it's certainly like, if you compare what open, the responses to that at the beginning to what it is now, I think the same is going to be true of AI when we go 10 years in the future. And so what you need, you're absolutely right, is a kind of pragmatic approach to, yes, we shouldn't ignore this. There's a ton of opportunities associated with this. There absolutely are also risks associated with AI. So how do we evaluate this in a way where we do keep an open mind towards what's possible? And I think that certainly sums up what I think we need to do when evaluating everything in our industry in terms of potential strategies or new opportunities. And there needs to be this willingness to take risks. We need to have environments where people can fail. If we don't have that within our organizations and within the market in general, we're not going to have any sort of progress. So I think that's something that, again, I really try to cultivate at BioOne. And it's something that I really want to see us doing more of as an industry. And that is the ability, like, not every time, we take a swing, we're going to hit one out of the park. But, I think we can be brutal in saying like, this organization tried this and it didn't work, or this, I think that's the wrong mindset. I think we need to say, wow, good for them for, doing something different, testing this new, pilot, this new model, we need that. And we should be thankful as an industry. I love to see other organizations trying things, even if I'm a little skeptical of the approach that they're taking. That is a live case study that I can then learn from. And that if I see something that then does not succeed, I can say, okay, well, that's maybe this is how I might iterate on that. Or maybe this is another direction I could take. So I do think we need to be more open to that sort of experiment in the industry and certainly within our own organizations. And again, have that iterative learning process of that will help us all progress. And I think, on a smaller level within our organizations, we really need to be, as a previous question you said, how do we live our values? How do we be inclusive in our approaches? That we need to be learning and listening to everyone in our organizations, irrespective of role or position, about, where we see, new ideas coming from, things that we want to pursue. If we believe we can't do it alone in terms of overall organization strategy, which I think we know is the theme of this, talk, and certainly in general, what we're talking about overall in the market of collaborating and working together, this has to also start within the organization. This idea of working across our teams to find these future solutions and to, experiment in a really productive way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of, again, as a benefit to our listeners, Lauren, how do you keep yourself updated with everything that's happening in the industry? There's so much happening, like you said, new business models, new maybe technology developments, new tools coming up, government-related, policy changes. So yeah, just how do you keep yourself updated?
Well, I mean, listening to this podcast being obviously the... But in seriousness, I do think, I am, consider myself a lifelong learner. I think we all have to be. And part of that learning context is I am, a voracious reader of anything that, from scholarly articles to some of, the wonderful blogs in our industry, to things like this, to, of course, going to conferences, to having conversations with people. So consuming all of that, I think, is really important to kind of keep up to date on what's going on. But I also think, and the same is true of the general news cycle, I think willingness to also read things and consume things that I know I don't agree with. Pundits out there that I don't, I'm completely at polar opposites to their approach. I still think it's really important for me to read that, for me to think about that, for me to look at, again, organizations that are doing things that, again, might not be what I would do. I still think there's absolute value in kind of unpacking what they're doing, why they're doing it, how that fits into the overall package to kind of give me a broader, more holistic understanding of where the industry is going, what the challenges are. I think we all need to kind of develop that, more multifaceted understanding. And that at least helps me personally kind of have a view on what I should do. Again, I think we're all at risk of kind of getting into our own echo chambers, or I have done this, or I'm surrounding myself with people that have done the same things or have the same perspectives and viewpoints. And I think that's really dangerous. I think, it's really helpful to be challenged, as uncomfortable as it is in the moment, to kind of have what I've done or, my thinking really questioned. Helps me develop more nuanced understanding and a better path forward.
I love that insight, Lauren, and especially the point around, even if there are different opinions or certain perspectives or certain people's opinion that you don't agree with, but I think it's very important to still take that. And I think just linking back to some of the other points you've mentioned around humility, around, being able to say no, around being able to take tough decisions in terms of not building things. I love that because I think irrespective of the industry, you need some of those things and on a consistent basis. If you really have to succeed, if you really want to be part of the community, if you really want to learn and have that willingness. And so, I mean, that's one of the key takeaways for me from this conversation. And last but not the least, Lauren, just to end on a slightly personal note, but when not at work, and I'm assuming you are able to switch off, how do you spend your time?
Oh my gosh. That's a big assumption.
Yes.
No, but that's the thing. I mean, in all honesty, when you love what you do so much, one of the things that, you certainly know is that I'm very fortunate to many of the people that I've worked with over the years. I count as really close friends. And so, I love that I have this global community of colleagues and friends that I'm very big on, all the wonderful conferences we go to and the business travel we have, really having then, personal travels and explorations on top of that. So, otherwise, I'm definitely a fan of a nice glass of wine, a good meal, and a great conversation, like this one. So if only we had recorded in the evening, I would have, a nice Cabernet with it. I will see you in a week at ALPSP. So we'll have a supplement to this conversation then.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. And I've seen you obviously over the years in so many conferences, Lauren, and I I fully agree with you, Aaron, because now I personally feel the same, so I can completely relate. I just enjoy being part of this community. To me, it's not even now so much about an industry or certain clients, or it's just about having conversations, going out there, talking about variety of things, maybe sometimes agreeing to disagree, and all of those aspects is something that I really enjoy and then reflect. I know you've not mentioned, but I know that you're a voracious reader, like you said, and thank you for the suggestion on one of the books that you mentioned. I'm really looking forward to that. So no, I think thank you for sharing all of these insights, and thank you for your time today, Lauren.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Nikesh. Really, always a pleasure, and appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to seeing you next week.
What a fantastic conversation we've had with Lauren Kane, CEO of BioOne. We've explored the nuances of scholarly publishing, discussed the importance of nonprofit collaborations, the value of sustainable publishing strategies, and the future direction of academic societies. Lauren's insights have been incredibly valuable. As we close, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Lauren for sharing her expertise with us today. And to all our listeners, stay tuned to Insights Exchange for more enlightening discussions that shape the future of academic research. Until next time, keep exploring the frontiers of knowledge.